Well, welcome. I'm Tom Laux, Communications Director, City of Marshfield, and I'm sitting here with Donna Rozar. Thank you for joining me. And she is a candidate running for the 69th Assembly here in the state of Wisconsin.
That is true.
We're going to get to learn quite a bit about her in this half hour or a little bit more. And I'm going to just start it off right now by asking her to tell us a bit about herself, her career. She does have a political background, and she's on the Wood County Board. But I want her to tell us that. So thanks for joining.
Tom, thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate the opportunity. I've been a resident of Marshfield since 1988. My husband and I moved here with our 5 children in November of that year. I did not see my backyard until May because there was a lot of snow that year. My husband was a cardiothoracic surgeon that unfortunately got infected with HIV infection in the operating room during his residency and died of complications from HIV infection in '93. We moved here for him to become a cardiothoracic surgeon at the Marshfield Clinic. When he died, I had 5 kids under 10, and so I did not work for a while. When Christina turned 17, I decided to go back to nursing. I had not put on a uniform for about 18 years, and so Marshfield, St. Joseph's Hospital at the time, was kind enough to give me a chance to learn how to be a nurse again. And so I've been working for almost 20 years on 3 North, which is the cardiac medical surgical floor at our hospital. I went casual after having worked there a number of years because I finished a master's in nursing education and I started teaching nursing students. So I taught for Marian University for about a year, and then I went to teach at UW-Eau Claire College of Nursing. I retired from my nurse educator career in May, and it was just a wonderful opportunity to invest in the next generation of nursing. You mentioned my political background. I have run for state office before. In 2002, there was a special election because Kevin Shapilski got appointed by Governor Doyle to a cabinet position, Secretary of Tourism, I believe it was. And I won a 4-way Republican primary in then the 24th State Senate District, which included Stevens Point and Wisconsin Rapids. It was a totally different boundary at that time, and lost in the general election to Julie Lassa. Been on the county board, the Wood County Board of Supervisors since 2000, have been re-elected every year, have had opposition some years. I had 2 people run against me one year, and a couple other times I had 1 person run against me. Have assumed a variety of leadership positions as a Wood County Board Supervisor, and have thoroughly enjoyed participating in policy making at the local municipal level.
All righty. Well, thanks for that information, and that definitely helps you out in this area of having that experience for 20 years, as you say, in the political area of local coverage. Well, we can talk right in about gerrymandering and
right away.
Why not? I mean, we just talked about boundaries and how they changed a while back, and then you hear about it wanting to change again, and there's some groups out there.
Right.
Just give me what your stance is on that.
Well, I know that gerrymandering has been going on for years. I mean, the Democrats did it when they were in power, and the Republicans have tweaked a couple of things. I'd like for boundaries to be as objective as possible. You may know that a section of Marshfield is in a different assembly district, and you know, I had people circulating my nominating papers, and they don't understand that if you live on this side of the road, you might be in the 86th, and if you live, so there were actually people on the east side of town that signed my nominating papers. So when I went through, I had to put lines through that because the state would have done it anyway. I do believe that cities need to stay together. I think we need to use common sense. We've lost a lot of common sense in a lot of things that we do in the political arena. And so I would be for drawing boundaries that reflect a great deal of common sense and not just drawn to protect somebody's seat or to make sure that it stayed a certain way. I don't know that you're ever going to get politics out of it, because I believe there are state statutes that actually talk about how that the controlling party gets to participate in that, and then I think the governor has some decisions, and I don't know all the nuances, but I don't know that you're ever going to get politics out of it, but I'd like for boundaries to make sense and for them to be done as objectively as possible.
Yeah, because it helps the voter, your local citizen, understand a little bit better. Their neighbor could be somebody different, and they're not aware of it.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. My son lives in town on East 3rd Street. East 3rd Street is in the 86th Assembly District, so I have a son who can't even vote for me because he lives 2 houses out of my district. And his next door neighbor saw me put a sign, because he's my son and he wanted a sign in my yard, and he came out and said, "I want one of your signs." And I said, "Well, you know you can't vote for me." And he didn't understand at all that he lived on the wrong side of Peach. And so you're right, the common person has a real hard time understanding if you live on this side of the street, you may be in another district, and so it's got to make some sense.
Yeah, and that makes it difficult for the election process as well, I bet.
Well, you have to print multiple ballots. It makes it more costly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And for the city to handle all that too, so
yep.
it's not
I think they
easy.
color code it, and so if you live in this district, you get a yellow one. If you live in that district, it's green. And I remember at one point in time, the wrong ballots went out to some districts, and it was a printing error, and the people that were responsible accepted total responsibility for the error. But I got some calls saying, "Your name's not on my ballot. Why is it not on?" Well, the wrong ballot had gone out, and it was a printing error.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good. And today it's so ballots are
Which
so
is critical that we
now.
do it right.
Yeah, yeah.
Just
so I'm sure
critical.
that's
Yeah.
looked now really close.
So does that answer your question
Yes.
about
But yeah,
gerrymandering?
thank you for
It
that.
is a very controversial topic.
And we'll hear about it for
Well,
a
and the
long
Wood
time.
County Board actually passed a resolution calling on people to be honest and to be apolitical when drawing the boundaries.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, let's switch gears to broadband. Yeah, it's so important.
Yes.
COVID has even shown more why we need that in our rural area. Our cities here are managed pretty much by our local cable companies. That's throughout the area, but it's our rural areas. What could you do? Can you do anything if you're elected? Is there anything you can do to help keep it affordable? What in your position, if you get elected, can be done?
Well, if you've looked at my website, you've seen that rural infrastructure is a huge thing that I really want to advocate for. And that doesn't only include bridges and roads, but it includes the utilities and broadband. I was just on the phone with the county board chairman this morning, and there are some opportunities for some grants in Wood County. And we're thinking about perhaps hiring a consultant to help us write some grants for this. Because you're right, the COVID situation did reveal the gaps that we have. I mean, there were some places in rural Wood County with school districts, they didn't even have access for virtual learning. And so I think I can help facilitate some of the grants that are out there. Marion Lippert has been working very hard on rural broadband access. And so I look forward to, she's kind of just been doing it because she's interested in it and not a formal position or anything. But there are some grants out there that we can access. I'm a huge proponent of public-private partnerships. Government doesn't have enough money to do everything that we need to do. And so I'm a huge collaborator with public-private partnerships. And so I see the possibility of working with some private companies to provide affordable, accessible broadband. I think those opportunities are out there. We just need to tap into them and facilitate the collaborations.
All right. Well, you kind of mentioned, well, not kind of, but you did mention transportation in there. I have that down the list, but I'm just going to bring it up the list here. And how important is that into our area so we can grow, our businesses can come, we have rail here. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that thing runs 24/7 almost.
That's not passenger rail. It's
Correct.
just,
Well, yeah.
Well, Amtrak, I don't think that runs this
Nope,
rail.
it doesn't. Maybe years ago it did.
Yes.
But just in general, for our industries and stuff,
Yes.
any kind of transportation, roads.
Yep.
What can you do to make sure that that is happening as well?
Well, we can advocate for adequate financing. A lot of our roads are financed by the state, and money passed through to local municipalities. So road aids are a huge issue, and the fair distribution of those road aids, and then a fair way for revenue to pay into those road aids so that we have enough money. Very expensive to rebuild a road. As a county board supervisor, I am not on the highway committee, but we have been borrowing millions of dollars for quite some time at the county to bring our roads up to speed. You're absolutely right. There is no doubt that our roads and bridges help us to be more competitive in the market. If we can't get people from the rural districts to the places where they need to work safely, and goods from the manufacturer, our milk, all of those things, we have to be able to do that safely, and our roads and bridges are a necessity in doing that safely. Funding those has been a discussion for years. The gasoline tax, do we raise the gasoline tax? Do we bring back indexing, which is the automatic increase in the gas tax? All of these things, registration fees have gone up. There's a big discussion about wheel taxes in municipalities. We've not gone there in Wood County or in the city of Marshfield, but there needs to be some real honest discussion about how we fund our road projects. Now, the other thing is designating certain monies to go into a transportation fund, and then by God, not touching that money so it's used for the purpose of building roads and bridges. And so I look forward to participating in that discussion. I want to be an advocate for adequate rural infrastructure. I have good working relationships already with people in Madison, and so I'm not a shy person. So I'm willing to go up to people and say, you know, can we have an honest conversation about how we can get our fair share of transportation aids in our rural district?
All right. Excuse me. So basically, a fund is like a capital improvement project that cities are doing. They put this in their fund, and then they're able to use it for just that, rather than just trying to find it, and then the project won't get done. And being on the county board, you definitely see it countywide, and actually vote on this as well. So.
And you know, you can't bond for operational expenses. You can only bond for capital improvement projects. So that's why we've been borrowing and bonding. Oh my gosh, I've never seen money so cheap. We just borrowed some money for roads and for some CIP at the county to be included in this next budget that we're going to pass in November. Oh, we got an interest rate. I mean, never in anybody's life have they seen interest rates. We kept our A2 status. We were very pleased with that, and we got a really good rate. And you know, people say, well, like a jail, and I don't want to talk about county issues because I'm running for state, but we've got this big discussion at the county now about whether we build a new jail or not. I am so tired of people saying, well, this would be the time to build a jail because money's so cheap. No, that's not just why you go out and borrow money. So you've got to think about all of those things, and you've got to think about the big picture. But I am not opposed to bonding for roads and bridges.
Right.
At the county level, I have, and I would at the state as well.
Okay. I guess I didn't have this on my list, and I'm just curious. Can you stay on the board if you win the election?
Well, there are state legislators that hold municipal elections. Municipal offices. I think we talked a few minutes ago that Scott Suter, who held this position like 2 people ago, was on the Abbotsford City Council for quite a long period of time. So there's no law against it. I think it becomes a work management organization thing. And a lot of the people that have municipal offices that also serve in the state legislature live close to Madison. And so it's not as problematic for them to hop from one meeting to the next. I will finish out my term. I will not resign my term because there's an overlap of 1 year. And then we'll see how it goes. I'm retired. Even though I still work as a nurse on 3 North, I've just kind of said, when I win this election, I'm handing in my uniforms. You can have my scrubs and all of that, and I'll bring them and people can have them. And so they're anticipating me resigning from that. And I have to tell you, I'll miss patient care a whole lot. I love taking care of patients, but that's the long answer to yes, you can serve in 2 capacities.
All right, well, good. Taxing. we hate hearing that word. Everybody does, but it has to happen, or you're not going to have services like our local municipality, or your state won't be able to do anything. We basically do nothing. We'll be on gravel roads. As a working class individual, what can you do, or can you do anything to help keep the taxes low?
Well, yes, the answer to that is yes. I believe in reasonable taxation. You're absolutely right. I believe there are responsibilities of government, public safety, the infrastructure that we talked about, getting people safely to and from, and we need to be reasonable about that. But we also fund a lot of things that I don't think are government's responsibilities. And there has to be a discussion about what is the business of government, and then let's do that well. We start, well, we can't give you $2 million, but we'll give you $500,000, Well, what good is that going to do? I don't know. I think there have to be real discussions about what the purpose of government is. I believe that we need to fund the basics of government. I believe that we need to be a safety net for individuals who are not able to work, the physically disabled, the people with chronic mental health conditions. There needs to be a safety net for those individuals. But the problem in our culture today is our safety net has become a hammock, and we are funding a lot of people lying in the hammock who are able-bodied individuals, and we need to incentivize them to get out of the hammock and go to work and help them to get job skills and help them to get the services. You've heard the phrase working poor. I went to California with a friend of mine. My friend's son in California was in a very tragic accident, and her husband said, I'm not going to California anymore. So I said, I'll go to California with you. I've never been to California. While I was out there, I went with the lady that we stayed with to do a food service. We served food to people in California. Well, people were driving up in their cars to come. They had a food bank, they had a clothing, they had hygiene things that people were coming. And I said, these are people that own cars. Why do they find a need to have to come to the church to get their meals? She said, we call them the working poor in California because housing is so expensive, and most of these people do not work at high-paying jobs, and so all they can do is afford to keep a car running to get to work and pay for their rent, and they depend on services like ours to do all of their other things. They go to different churches every night to eat, they go to food banks to get everything, and we need to make sure that people have the money that they need and the services that they need to have a good quality of life. So there is a responsibility in government to provide those services, and we need to do that reasonably.
And that's at the local level as well. And again, I'm going to skip down because it kind of a piece of the same message that you could relate here to our audiences. Our local municipalities are getting less and less, and that's going to happen more and more. Taxes change. The people aren't living here; they're moving out and get lower, and municipalities don't collect as much or less state aid. But what do you do? What can you do for local municipalities? Can you do anything to make that up? Or are you telling me that maybe they need to be smarter in their decisions with their budgets?
Well, I think we need to use our tax dollars more efficiently and cost effectively. That would be one thing. I hate fraud and waste. I just hate it. I don't think at the local municipalities there's fraud like there is, you read these stories about people that are collecting Social Security and their mother's been gone for 6 years and they never told anybody, and that's fraud. But we need to make sure that we use the tax dollars, because every tax dollar we spend is somebody's hard-earned dollar. I mean, you look at that and you think, well, it's easy to spend somebody else's dollar, but you have to remember that that came out of somebody else's pocket. So I would look, first of all, at the efficient use of tax dollars and how can we do this as cost effectively as possible. Government can't do everything. There's not going to be enough money in government to do everything. And if we don't allow people to keep as much money as possible in their own pockets for discretionary spending, I think we're on a downward spiral, and I don't want to see that. Reasonable taxation, decide what you need, have the people's input as to what needs to be funded, and develop those public-private partnerships so that we can meet the needs of the people in our local municipalities.
Yep, I thought you were going to say that, so.
Yep.
All right. Well, if you're just joining us, I'm sitting here with Donna Rozar, and she's running for the 69th Assembly position, which is currently under Bob Culp, and he has done that for 6 years, and he is not going to run. And now Donna and Brian Giles on the Democratic side, here on the Republican side.
Oh, yes, we didn't even mention that,
just
did
in
we?
case if people don't know, but you do have a red shirt.
I do have a red shirt. It says Rozar for State
Rozar
Assembly.
Yeah. So Brian will join us in another program. So if you want to see that will be in another program. We'll be asking the same questions to him as well. But again, we thank Donna for coming. We do have more questions, so she's not out of here yet. Let's talk about education. That's a big deal. And if we don't have educated people in our society, where do we go? You're not going to have new things, new inventions. Pretty much everything will become a stalemate. Is there anything you can do to help the college kid today? And I don't know if you can in these positions. I'll just leave it up to you, or maybe ideas to help with their debt. We know they're going into serious debt. College isn't cheap. Is there anything that can be done on the state level?
Well, I think we have to continue to look at the cost of tuition. Now, I can just speak to our state institutions. You know, we certainly have a lot of private colleges that people can go to as well. But education needs to be affordable. I'm a perfect example of a first-generation college person. When I told my mother at 8 years of age, my mother says, I looked at her and said, I'm going to be a nurse when I grow up. And so when I was 8, I felt called to be a nurse. And so I'm sure my parents started saving for me to go to nursing school. So I graduated from high school, went directly into nursing school that fall. I went to a school of nursing. Remember when the hospitals had 3-year diploma programs, you worked all year round. You never went home in the summer because you staffed the hospital in the summer. I remember thinking, oh my gosh, when I was 19 years old, I was charge of a medical surgical floor as a junior nursing student because tuition was cheap because that we were subsidized by the hospital, who then used us as staff. Well, that was my original. I wanted to go to college. I graduated pretty high in my class academically, and I wanted to go to the university. My father had a fit. You want to be a nurse, you're going to nursing school. Because, see, there wasn't that understanding of a liberal education back then. So I did not get a bachelor's degree in nursing until I married a man who was college educated. And then when we lived in Tennessee, I got my bachelor's in nursing at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And then when we moved here and my husband died, I decided I'd get a master's degree. So my master's degree is from Viterbo in La Crosse. But I'm a perfect example. I grew up as a farm girl. You know, we were poor, but I never felt poor because all of us were poor. My mother made my dresses out of the feed sacks that we fed the feed to the chickens that we raised to sell eggs to make some extra money. But everybody was kind of in the same boat back then, and you didn't really feel poor. But I knew that I didn't want to sell eggs and wear feed sack dresses for the rest of my life. So education for me was a way to build my socioeconomic status. After my husband died, what a blessing for me to have a nursing degree and to be able to go back into nursing and make a decent living for myself. That was a real blessing. So I personally understand how education can help people's socioeconomic status. So I would advocate for another thing. I would advocate for a few things. Number one, making education as accessible and affordable as possible. I've been very active in the Wood. We've called it the Wood for years, and now I'm pointing up there because that's 5th Street up there. It's now the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point at Marshfield. I've been chair of that commission for over 10 years, been very active, was active in the foundation. So I would encourage local people to also offer scholarships to students who are interested. The foundation here at our 2-year, well, it's not a 2-year college anymore. They're giving 4-year degrees, and the ITV that you can use to, to teach in one location and your students are in another location, utilizing all that technology to help make education accessible benefits people. That's why I was such a big supporter of that college here. We've got county board supervisors that do not want to support that college, and it's half supported by the county and half supported by the city. And we have county board supervisors that would love to pool our funding of that. And every time that comes up, I stand up and advocate for our 2-year campus here, because I know what needs it meets of the local people to get an education. They can work at a job in the day, they can go to classes at night. It helps them then for career advancement, it helps them socioeconomically to advance income-wise. And so, again, a public-private partnership where you keep the state colleges as affordable as possible for people. You have accessibility like our colleges, like our Wood campus here in town, and then you encourage people who are able to help set up scholarships to support people that want to advance their education.
Yeah, well, what you're telling me is the people maybe that cannot afford maybe going to Stevens Point and living there or an apartment can get the same education basically here.
Live at home.
And live at home. The cost is, I understand, is less.
Yes, it is. And Pat Sturr, who used to be the dean there, she was always bragging about the fact that the people that got out of this campus debt-free was very high, that people were able to find the money that they needed to take classes. And the other thing is then taking classes a little bit at a time. You don't have to go full-time. There's this big joke about, I went to get my degree, it took me 5 years instead of 4. Well, that's okay. If you're goal-oriented and you know where you want to go, you just chip away at it a little bit at a time.
I'm one of those people, but I work full-time and went to school. So that happens, but that's what I wanted to do, and I liked the work experience and still wanted that bachelor's degree. So it works, and I think the school up here is vital to this area. So
affordable, accessible, public-private partnerships to help students get the education that they'd like.
All right. Let's talk about dairy. You grew up on a farm. I don't know if it's a dairy farm.
Nope, it wasn't a dairy farm. It was a beef farm.
Well, I put here, there's a lot of dairy in this area.
Yes.
We know that. It's a big deal here. I found that out even more than I thought there was here when I moved here from the Plover area. It's a big difference. Even though you're almost in the same county, all Plover, Portage, but I worked in Rapids, but like two opposites.
Do you get into Clark County very much?
Not a lot. Although I live almost right at the corner.
Well, a chunk of the 69th is in Clark County, so I have been there quite a bit.
Quite a bit. What can you do? Is there anything you can do if you get elected to help that small dairy farmer?
Well, it's going to be tough. I tell you, it's tough. I think that, and I have so much to learn. I am not telling you that I'm sitting here knowing all the issues that I'm going to have to be facing as a state legislator. But I know that, number one, we need to help them with education. We have the extension. There's all kinds of resources at the county to help dairy farmers do things more efficiently, to help them with their manure pits. All of those things. That's available, and we need to get our extension agents and our conservation people out in the field to help people do that. Infrastructure is a huge part of that. They got to move their products to market, and they have to be able to move livestock and do all of that they need to do. I'm not sure all the reasons, all the ways we can help the dairy farmers. It kind of breaks my heart in a little bit that we're moving to these big corporation farms, and the small farmers are not finding it as it can't make a living. They're struggling, and I don't know all the ways that we can help them do that. But I am open to helping them do that. I love rural Wisconsin. I grew up on a farm. in Orange, Virginia. I lived so far out in the country. I had a guy in high school tell me one time he'd ask me out on a date, but it would take him too long to get to pick me up. And so I said, well, you're not worth dating anyway. But I lived so far back that our lane was a mile and a half back into off the road. I crossed a railroad track. It was dirt, of course it was dirt. And it might not have been a mile and a half. It might have just been a mile. But I know what rural living is like. Rural living is great. You know, we lived on a 2,800 acre farm, and I could ride my horse, and I know how wonderful it is to drive the tractor and pick up hay bales and harvest corn and throw hay bales in the barn and everything. So I want to help the farmers. And I live in Marshfield, so I really am a city girl right now and have been a city girl for a long time. But I've been out and about, and I know that there are things that I can advocate for in Madison that would help not only the small farmers, but also the large farmers. And I'm so willing to learn what that is and participate in those discussions.
All right. Well, the coronavirus, it's still here, hasn't went away. It's been really plaguing us since February. Gideon, is there anything that you would do maybe differently than it's done now, or anything you could do? I know you're not going to be able to make a vaccine, but you can. What can you do? What can you support? What do you not support?
Well, I'll tell you how disheartened I am that this virus has been politicized to the hilt. That has made me so sad. I've been a nurse for a long time. We've been through the Spanish flu. I heard stories about the 1918 flu from my grandmother and how devastating that was. We've had tuberculosis in our society. My husband died of I just touched my microphone. My husband died of HIV infection, which was a horrible virus that we dealt with in the late 80s. When my husband was diagnosed with HIV, it was a death sentence. Now we've got ART, and HIV infection is a chronic disease now. We've never treated a virus where we've shut down the economy, where we've restricted people's movements. It's just made me very sad how politicized. Our health departments have done a marvelous job with contact tracing and encouraging people to wear masks. I've never been in favor of mandatory masks, was not in favor of mandatory masks when it started being talked about. Then the governor came out with the mask mandate. I was not in favor of that. And now, of course, he's re-upped that, not in favor of that. And we've been preaching hand washing, hand hygiene, stay home when you're sick, all those things for years. And I just wonder if maybe we hadn't politicized this so much, if we wouldn't be in this bad a situation. I think shutting down states was worst thing we could have done. I think that there were safer things that we could have done, and states that did not do so have fared well. And, it's there. I think this is going to have to run its course. I was just talking to our health officer yesterday, and now we're seeing a lot of coronavirus in the schools and the young. I think that's herd immunity. They don't get real sick with this. Hopefully they'll build up some reinfection, some immunity. We are concerned about people that are showing up twice being positive. They were positive, and then 3 months later they have another positive test. So those things need to be investigated about, did they develop immunity from having it the first time? I think there's still a lot of questions about this. I think a vaccine will be a good thing. There are a lot of people that aren't going to take the vaccine, and I would never vote for mandatory vaccinations. And so it's going to be interesting how the vaccine plays out, because there are people that don't take the flu vaccine, and we call them anti-vaxxers, and that's not probably a very nice way to call them. But there are people that just don't believe in vaccines. And so I think we have a little bit more to learn about this, and it kind of is a work in progress, and we take it day by day. And
yep. Well, if you get in, I'm sure that'll be part of your agenda.
Yep.
To deal with it.
Yeah, and I've been talking about a lot of people, because I do want to mention all the organizations that have endorsed me at some point in time, and oh my gosh, we're way beyond our 30 minutes. But all these individuals that I've been talking to in these small business association, these various organizations, I've already said to them, I'm looking for information. I'm not going to swallow hook, line, and sinker everything that comes from your organization, but I will use you as a resource in order to learn. I've got a lot to learn. I've got a steep learning curve. I'm able to learn, but there's a whole nother body of information that I'm going to have to learn as a state legislator.
All righty. Well, let me ask you this last question, and it has to do with why a voter should vote for you. You can tell me, you can tell the camera, which is the audience. Those are the ones that are going to be voting for you.
Well, I won't even ask you if you live in my district, because don't say yes or no, but I'm saying I'm going to treat you like you were able to vote for me, and then I will tell you why I believe I'm the best candidate in this race. I have been involved in the community for a number of years. I believe that I have experience in policy making. I think you know that the county is the arm of the state, and so I understand how the resources that come from the state affect local municipalities. And so I can go with that information and then take that experience as a state legislator to say, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't play out in the local municipality like you're thinking that it's going to down here in Madison. So I believe that I have unique work-life experiences that will benefit the individuals that live in the 69th Assembly District. My healthcare experience, my experience as a nurse, my experience with that whole situation with raising 5 adopted kids and my husband dying, and it really gave me a body of knowledge that is unique. I believe that my enthusiasm, my love for central Wisconsin, my knowledge of rural issues, and my passion for issues that play out in the political arena will serve the residents of the 69th Assembly District well.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for coming and answering our questions, get a chance to get to know you better. And for those that haven't voted, it's changed so much.
Have been out for a while.
And they're sealed, a lot of them, sealed and shut, we don't know. Can't change it then. But there's also in-person voting coming up soon at City Hall, and that'll be a big one. And then you're November 4th. I believe that's the date.
November 3rd's the election. November 3rd's the election, but the 4th will be celebratory time.
We hope, unless it gets, it sits for 2 weeks because we don't know where we're at on election. Although I think on the local level, we'll be fine. It's the presidential level. We don't know where we're going to be.
Well, in April, we didn't know until the next week that we had won our county board seats, because remember that extension was there,
well, and it's now again, I heard.
I thought that the judge nixed that and said that they had to be in by 8 o'clock on the day of the election.
I think we'll have to look at it. As of right now, I don't know. I remember our clerk this morning bringing some up again now that it was overturned again, just like a day ago, but I don't know. We'll see.
I've been campaigning, so I don't watch.
We don't know. We're not sure, and we'll go from there. But again, I will sign off. Otherwise, we will go over an hour.
Yes, likely. We will, and we could.
That's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. We want to educate our viewers. That's really the most important. When you're voting, you sure want to know who you're voting for.
Yep.
I think that's the most important part. Nothing like going up there and saying, "Who is this?" and then circling that candidate. So, thanks for joining me on this public access program for Marshfield Media Access. I'm the Communications Director, City of Marshfield. I want to thank David Bennett. He's our Communications Specialist. He's hiding behind the scenes here doing the editing of this program. And we'll be back with another candidate. We'll be talking with Brian as well. Not right now, but down in the near future. Thanks again for joining me on Marshfield Media Access.